be prevailed on to attend rigidly to the medical instructions for preserving it. These instructions, which forbid him to exercise his profession for the next 6 months at least, are, in our case, very hard to follow. They will but too probably sentence us to poverty, perhaps to actual want, but they must be borne resignedly and even thankfully, seeing that my husband's forced cessation from work will save him from the dreadful affliction of loss of sight. I think I can answer for my own cheerfulness and endurance now that we know the worst. Can I answer for our children also? Surely I can, when there are only 2 of them. It is a sad confession to make, but now, for the first time since my marriage, I feel thankful that we have no more. Dread came over me last night after I had comforted William as well as I could about the future and had heard him fall off to sleep, that the doctor had not told us the worst. Medical men do sometimes deceive their patients from what has always seemed to me to be misdirected kindness of heart. The mere suspicion that I had been trifled with on the subject of my husband's illness caused me such uneasiness that I made an excuse to get out and went in secret to the doctor. Fortunately, I found him at home, and in 3 words I confessed to him the object of my visit. He smiled and said I might make myself easy. He had told us the worst. And that worst, I said to make certain, is that for the next 6 months my husband must allow his eyes to have the most perfect repose. Exactly, the doctor answered. Mind, I don't say that he may not dispense with his green shade indoors for an hour or 2 at a time as the inflammation gets subdued, but I do most positively repeat that he must not employ his eyes. He must not touch a brush or pencil. He must not think of taking another likeness on any consideration whatever for the next 6 months. His persisting in finishing those 2 portraits at the time when his eyes first began to fail was the real cause of all the bad symptoms that we've had to combat ever since. I warned him, if you remember, Mrs. Kirby, when he first came to practice in our neighborhood. I know you did, sir, I replied. But what was a poor traveling portrait painter like my husband, who lives by taking likenesses first in one place and then in another, to do? Our bread depended on his using his eyes at the very time when you warned him to let them have a rest. Have you no other resources? No money but the money Mr. Kirby can get by portrait painting? Asked the doctor. None, I answered, with a sinking at my heart as I thought of his bill for medical attendance. Will you pardon me, he said, colouring and looking a little uneasy, or rather, will you ascribe it to the friendly interest I feel in you if I ask whether Mr. Kirby realizes a comfortable income by the practice of his profession? Don't, he went on anxiously before I could reply. Pray don't think I make this inquiry from a motive of impertinent curiosity. I felt quite satisfied that he could have no improper motive for asking the question, and so answered it at once, plainly and truly. My husband makes but a small income, I said. Famous London portrait painters get great prices from their sitters, but poor unknown artists who only travel about the country are obliged to work hard and be contented with very small gains. After we've paid all that we owe him, I'm afraid we shall have little enough left to retire on when we take refuge in some cheaper place. In that case, said the good doctor, I'm so glad and proud to remember that I always liked him from the first. In that case, don't make yourself anxious about my bill when you're thinking of clearing off your debts here. I can afford to wait till Mr. Kirby's eyes are well again, and I shall then ask him for a likeness of my little daughter. By that arrangement, we are sure to be both quits and both perfectly satisfied. He considerately shook hands and bade me farewell before I could say half the grateful words to him that were on my lips. Never, never shall I forget that he relieved me of my two heaviest anxieties at the most anxious time of my life. The merciful, warm-hearted man. I could almost have knelt down and kissed his doorstep as I crossed it on my way home. If I had not resolved, after what happened yesterday, to look only at the cheerful side of things for the future, the events of today would have robbed me of all my courage at the very outset of our troubles. First, there was the casting up of our bills, and the discovery, when the amount of them was balanced against all the money we have saved up, that we shall only have between £3 and £4 left in the cash box after we have got out of debt. Then there was the sad necessity of writing letters in my husband's name to the rich people who were ready to employ him, telling them of the affliction that had overtaken him and of the impossibility of his executing their orders for portraits for the next 6 months to come. And lastly, there was the heartbreaking business for me to go through of giving our landlord warning just as we got comfortably settled in our new abode. If William could only have gone on with his work, we might have stopped in this town and in these clean and comfortable lodgings for at least 3 or 4 months. We have never had the use of a nice empty garret before for the children to play in, and have never met with any landlady so pleasant to deal with in the kitchen as the landlady here. And now we must leave all this comfort and happiness and go, I hardly know when. William, in his bitterness, says to the workhouse, but that shall never be if I have to go out to service to prevent it. The darkness is coming on, and we must save in candles, or I could write much more. Ah, what a day this has been. I've had but one pleasant moment since beginning, and that was in the morning when I set the little Emily to work on a bead purse for the kind doctor's daughter. My child, young as she is wonderfully neat-handed at stringing beads, and even a poor little empty purse as a token of our gratitude is better than nothing at all. Visit from our best friend, our only friend here, the doctor. After he had examined William's eyes and had reported that they were getting on as well as can be hoped at present, he asked where we thought of going to live. I said that the cheapest place we could find, and added that I was about to make inquiries in the by-streets of the town that very day. Put off those inquiries, he said, till you hear from me again, and going now to see a patient at a farmhouse 5 miles off. You needn't look at the children, Mrs. Kirby. It's nothing infectious, only a clumsy lad who's broken his collarbone by a fall from a horse. They receive lodgers occasionally at the farmhouse, and I know no reason why they should not be willing to receive you. If you want to be well housed and well fed at a cheap rate, and if you like the society of honest, hearty people, the farm of Appletree Wick is the very place for you. Don't thank me till you know whether I can get you these new lodgings or not. In the meantime, settle all your business affairs here so as to be able to move at a moment's notice. With those words, the kind-hearted gentleman nodded and went out. Pray heaven he may succeed at the farmhouse. We may be sure of the children's health at least, if we live in the country. Talking of the children, I must not omit to record that Emily has nearly done one end of the blue purse already. A note from the doctor was too busy to call. Such good news. They will give us 2 bedrooms and board us for the family at Appletree Wick for 17 shillings a week. By my calculations, we shall have £3.16 left after paying what we owe here. That will be enough, at the outset, for 4 weeks living at the farmhouse, with 8 shillings to spare besides. By embroidery work, I can easily make 9 shillings more to put to that, and there is a 5th week provided for. Surely, in 5 weeks' time, considering the number of things I can turn my hand to, we may hit on some plan for getting a little money. This is what I am always telling my husband, and what, by dint of constantly repeating it, I am getting to believe myself. William, as is but natural, poor fellow, does not take so light-hearted view of the future as I do. He says that the prospect of sitting idle and being kept by his wife for months to come is something more wretched and hopeless than words can describe. I tried to raise his spirits by reminding him of his years of honest hard work for me and the children, and of the doctor's assurance that his eyes will get the better in good time of their present helpless state. But he still sighs and murmurs, being one of the most independent and high-spirited of men, about living a burden on his wife. I can only answer what in my heart of hearts I feel, that I took him for better and for worse, that I've had many years of the better, and that even in our present trouble, the worse shows no signs of coming yet. The bead purse is getting on fast, red and blue in a pretty striped pattern. think I'm young. When I was a little girl, my father and mother used to go around fast and give very good performances. And I used to do the salto mortale and various little things. And when Papa and Mama died, a German lady took me to her and began to teach me. I liked it. I grew up and became a governess. And where I came from, and who I am, I don't know. I don't know. Who my parents were? Perhaps they weren't married. I don't know. I don't know anything. I do want to talk. But I haven't anybody to talk to. I haven't anybody at all. I whispered to Marjorie and Don Bernardino, "If they once get away, we're lost. We must stop them at all hazards." The Spaniard nodded, and Marjorie squeezed my hands. There was no need of speech. Then I fixed the order of battle. I was to fire first, then the Spaniard, then Marjorie, each saving his fire till we knew whether another shot was required. This precaution was necessary as we had no reserve ammunition. We took it for granted that the chambers of the revolvers were full. My one shot had been satisfactory in this respect. I saw that even at the risk of betraying ourselves to our enemies, we must give warning again. And so fired. There was an answering cheer from the Keystone through the fog. And then a sudden rush forward of those on our own deck. When they were close to us, the seamen hung back, but the men of the gang kept on firing as they came. Fortunately, we were in a line behind cover, for I could hear the ping and the tearing wood as the bullets struck the mast. I fired a shot just to show that we were armed and heard a sharp cry. Then they fell back. In a moment or two, they also had formed their plan of battle. These were men used to such encounters. And as they knew that at such times a quick rush may mean everything, they did not let the grass grow under their feet. I could see one of the seamen remonstrating with them and hear the quick, angry tones of his voice. He pointed out into the fog, where now there was distinctly a luminous patch of light. The searchlight was moving towards us. The Keystone was coming down on us. The blackmailer shook off the seaman and then gave some directions to his comrades. They spread out right and left of us and tried to find some kind of cover. I lifted Marjorie and put her standing on the barrel fastened behind the mast. For I thought that as the flash of my pistol had come from the deck, they would not expect anyone to be raised so high. Don Bernardino and I curled down on the deck. And our opponents began to fire. In the thickening fog and with the motion of the ship, their aim was vague. Fortunately, no one was hit. When I thought I had a chance, I fired. But there was no response. The Don got a shot. And Marjorie another. There was no sound, save that of the bullets striking on wood or iron. Then Marjorie fired twice in rapid succession. There was a quick exclamation and then a flood of horrible profanity. The man was only winged. Again and again they fired, and I heard a groan behind me from the dawn. "What's that?" I whispered, not daring to stop or even to look back. "My arm! Take my pistol! I cannot shoot with my left hand!" I put my hand back, and he placed the revolver in it. I saw a dark form rush across the deck and fired. And missed. I tried another shot, but the weapon only answered with a click. The chambers were exhausted, so I used the other revolver. And so for a few minutes a furious fight went on. Marjorie seldom fired. She was holding herself in reserve. But before I knew what was happening, my second revolver was empty. Our antagonists were no chickens at their work. There was little to teach any of them in such a method of contest as this. Someone had evidently been counting the shots, for I suddenly called out, "Not yet, boys! They've at least 3 shots still!" With a sudden, simultaneous rush, they ran back into shelter. During this time, we'd been tearing through the water at our full speed. But behind us on the port quarter was the sound of a great ship steaming on. The roar of the furnaces could be heard in the trumpeting of the funnels. The boatswain's whistles were piping, and there were voices of command cutting hoarsely through the fog. The searchlight, too, was at work. We could see its rays high up on the mist. Though they did not, at the moment, penetrate sufficiently to expose us to the lookout of the Keystone. Closer on our starboard quarter was another sound which came on the trailing wind. The rush of a small vessel running fast. We could hear down the wind the sharp slap, slap of the waves on the bows, and the roaring of the wind among the cordage. This must be the Sporran following us with grim disregard of danger. The commander of the whaler, recognizing the possibility of discovery, put his helm hard to starboard. I could myself not see through the darkness, but the seaman did, and took his chance of grounding in Cruden Bay. When we had run in a little way, the helm was jammed hard down again, and we ran on the other tack. For the moment we were lost to both the warship and the yacht. Marjorie looked at me appealingly, and I nodded. The situation was not one to be risen. She fired another shot from her pistol. There was an immediate reply from far out on our port side, in the shape of more directions spoken with trumpet, and answering piping from the boatswains. remonstrance from the whaler captain. A threat that if there were any more firing, he would down with his sails and take chance of being captured. One of the gang answered him. That packet can't capture you within the 3-mile limit. It's a cruiser of Uncle Sam's. They won't risk having to lie up in harbour here till the war is over. To which the other sadly replied, I wouldn't put money on it. Anyhow, someone will. You keep quiet if you can. There's enough against us already if we should be caught. The reply of the blackmailer was at least practical. I could not see what he did, but I took it that he put his pistol to the captain's head, as he said with a frightful oath, "You go on as you arrange with me, or I'll blow your brains out where you stand. There's quite enough against any of us, you included. So your one chance anyhow is to get out of this hole. See?" The captain accepted the position and gave his orders with a quiet delivery, to the effect that we ran first shorewards and then to starboard again till we were running back on our tracks like a hare. Suddenly, however, this course was brought to an end by our almost running into a small vessel which I could see was a yacht. We were so close for a few seconds that I shouted out, "All right, McRae. All safe as yet. She's trying to run out to sea. Try to tell the Keystone." The answer was a cheer from all aboard. As our ship swept into the fog, several of our enemies ran at us. I handed Don Bernardino his own dagger and took the bowie knife myself. Then we stood ready in case our foes should get to close quarters. They got nearly up to us, firing as they came. But we were just then sheltering behind the mast, and no injury was done. They hesitated to come on, not seeing us, and we waited. As we stood with beating hearts, the ship began to come to starboard again. We must have been sheltered in some way, for we did not seem to feel either wind or tide so much as before. Suddenly, one of the seamen said, "Whist, I hear breakers." The rest paused and listened, and the captain called out, "Hard to starboard! We're running on shore!" The ship answered at once, and we began to run across the wind, feeling the tide at the same time. But as we went, a searchlight flashed on the fog before us. We could not stop or change quick enough to quite avoid the ship from which it came. But the helm was put hard to starboard again, and we ran close alongside a great warship. I could see her tower with protruding cannon as we ran by. A voice came through a speaking trumpet, and I could just catch the first words as the vessel swept by us. "Rocks ahead!" The instinct of the seaman spoke, even at such a time, to keep another vessel from harm. The answer from our vessel was a volley of curses. Then the searchlight swept our deck, and we could see all our enemies. They were around us in a great ring, closing in upon us. They saw us too, and with a shout began to run in. I took Marjorie by the waist and ran with her to the bow of the ship. I flung her up on the bulwark and jumped up beside her. Don Bernardino joined us in a moment, and we saw the searchlight as it passed us and pierced into the fog ahead. Already, the bulk of the battleship was almost lost in the mist. There was only a faint indication of her presence in a monstrous mass behind the searchlight. In front of us, there was a great roaring of water, and that sharp rushing sound which comes from the back sweep of a broken wave. Our skipper saw the danger, and in a voice like a trumpet gave his orders, but it was too late to do anything. As the searchlight again swept our deck, I saw the ring of men break up and scatter. The rays passing beyond us fell on a low rock up whose sides great waves were dashing. We were rushing to it, borne by wind and tide in a terrible haste. At that instant, we struck a rock below the water. With a shock, we three were thrown forward into the sea. I heard a despairing shout behind us, and then the water closed over my head. When I rose, it was in a wild agony of fear for Marjorie. She had been sitting to my left on the bulwark and must therefore have fallen to seaward of me. I raised myself as well as I could and looked around, and by God's grace saw two hands rising above the water a few yards from me. With all my might I struggled towards them and was able to drag my wife up to the surface. When I had her with me, though my terror and anxiety increased, I could think. At such moments, the mind acts with lightning speed. I came to the conclusion that the rock we had struck must be amongst the Skares. The only chance was to edge in with the tide, tried to avoid striking any of the underlying rocks, which I knew well were so deadly. It was a desperate struggle before us. The tide was racing amongst the rocks, and even were there no waves, it would have been a difficult task to have won through it into shore. For myself, I was a strong enough swimmer to have found my way in, but with Marjorie to care for, too. Marjorie, who had only lately learned to swim. The prospect was indeed a terrible one. We must not lose a chance. so I made my wife loose her skirts. She could then swim more freely and to the best of her power. The wind beat fiercely, and the tops of the breaking waves nearly choked us as they flew. There was just light enough down on the water level to see rocks a few yards ahead. The line of the shore rose like one dim, opaque mass. There was little I could do save keep Marjorie's head and my own above the water and let the current bear us on. I must avoid the rocks as well as I could and let all my efforts tend to bring us shorewards. There was not time for fears or doubting or hoping. The moments must pass and the struggle be made, never ending though it seemed to be. After a few minutes I began to tire. The strain of the last few days had begun to tell on me. I had now and again passing thought of friends who had been helping us, but they were all far off. I was relapsing into the lethargy of despair. With a violent effort I worked to the task before me and kept sternly on my way. Marjorie was striving her utmost, but her strength was failing. Her weight was becoming deader. That nerved me to further effort. And I swam on so frantically that I drew closer to the mainland. Here there was shelter of a kind. The waves, broken by the outer rocks, were less forceful. The crested tops which the wind had driven on us were weakening also. There was hope in this, and it kept me up. On I fought. On. 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 Oh, would the struggle never end? I shut my teeth and forged on fiercely. Joy! There was shore beneath my feet. Rough pebbles which rolled and worked against each other. The wave pulled us back, but my heart was renewed again. I made one more frantic effort and swam closer to the land. Then, as I saw the wave begin to recoil, I put down my feet, and with the last of my strength lifting Marjorie in my arm, I fought fiercely with the retreating wave. Staggering over the screaming pebbles, exhausted to the point of death, I bore her high up on the beach and laid her down. Then I sank lifeless beside her cold body. The last thing I remember was the faint light of the coming dawn, falling on her marble white face as she lay on the shore.